It's that most wonderful time of the year yet again. No, it's not the build-up for Christmas. No, it's not the build-up for any summer fun. Although, to be honest, this is increasingly becoming the new fun summer activity for many people. No, it is the fact that we are seeing continuing discharges of sewage into our rivers and, of course, into our seas. And this is causing huge environmental damage. We covered just a couple of weeks ago what I think was happening to the let me try and pronounce this correctly. It was the River U, I think, where the environmentalists said the people who were looking after the river said, look, this river is no longer becoming ecologically able to support the life that it used to. It is a dying river because of these sewage discharges. And you have also been seeing, no doubt, on, well, Twitter, but, X, or the website formerly known as Twitter, as we should probably start calling it, you've seen an increased, once again, view of videos of, oh, look at this. Here I am on the coast, and you can see this sewage discharge into the ocean along to this nice coastal beach where there's one very worryingly in particular where it pans and you can see all the people on the beach as this sewage literally just goes out and floats around down to their beach where all those people are. Yeah, quite concerning. And I want to point out, all this started in 2020. Nothing before then. Why? Because this is a Brexit-related issue. As much as the Tories and the water companies don't want to admit that it's a Brexit issue, it really is, because there are no longer those environmentally enforceable and fines. There's no longer the European bodies and the inspectors that would come along and expect these things. They don't have to follow those European laws, rules, and regulations anymore. So, well, they can get away with doing all this stuff. And it is very, very worrying where we have had possibly one of the most high profile sporting events outside the Olympics take place here in the UK. And as at the moment, over 57 swimmers for the World Triathlon Championship have fallen ill. They've gotten diphtheria. That is not a good look. That is not a good look at all for the UK. And where's Teresa Coffey? Well, she's nowhere to be seen. I would expect that Teresa Coffey, probably this summer, is going to be keeping a very, very low profile. But let's read through some of the experiences of the swimmers, and then let's go over the statement of I think it's Northumberland Water. Let me get that right. Yeah, Northumberland Water, what they had to say about this. But yeah, this isn't good. This really isn't good. And I want to heavily stress this. This is Brexit related. The Brexiteers and the water companies and even Teresa Coffey wants to deny it. But all this started in 2020 after we left the official date of Brexit. It's not a coincidence. It's really not a coincidence, because you do not just go from having good environmentally running rivers and beaches and sea to this. You just don't make that transition. There's got to be an interconnector somewhere that codes this, and it's Brexit. Because these companies, if this happened, they would face very, very hefty fines. Because we're no longer in the EU, they don't have to face those hefty fines. So, and by the way, this is increasing yet again, just as we saw with how bad the railways are getting. People say, well, should we nationalize water companies again? It started that conversation. You'll notice on the levels of nationalization, it's rail still at like Um, I think the last time I saw one, it was like 60, 63, 64% for rail, and then water was normally again quite low at around 30, which most of them do sort of hover around, but that's now at 48%. Last time I saw one. So we're just going to go over to Guardian with some of the people who were participating in this triathlon. And of course, we'll go over what Northumberland Water had to say. And their excuse, to be honest, for this, because it really does seem to be like an excuse. So, where here it is. So, yeah, Jacob Bristleworth, 28, who is an Australian triathlete, posted the environmental agency's result on his Instagram. He said that he had felt unwell after the event. He wrote this: had been feeling pretty rubbish since the race, but I guess that's what happens when you swim in shit. The swim should have been cancelled. Another athlete responded, at least I know what got me. And a bunch of other athletes who raced also sick and ill. Another wrote, now that explains why I spent Monday night with my head in the toilet after racing Sunday morning. Ailey Eve Hartley Roberts from Leeds, who also competed in the standard category of the 1,500 meter swim, said that she had not fallen ill, but fellow competitors have suffered from upset stomachs, she said. I like to swim outdoors, but I do not have any confidence in the cleanliness of seas, rivers, and lakes, etc., because of the dumping of sewage and other effluents. Erin Perrin, the science and research officer at the campaign group Surfers Against Sewage, had this to say. A sample taken on the 26th of July showed unprecedented levels of E. coli were over what is natural for this body of water or is even safe for human recreational use and urgently needs to be investigated. Bob Latimer, 79, a campaigner and pursued legal action for several years against the government over sewage discharges off Wilburn, which is north of Rock Beach, said that a pre-action letter was sent on behalf of the Environmental Law Foundation to the Department of Environmental, Food and Rural Affairs, or DEFRA, and of course the regulator, Ofwat, back in June for a proposed judicial review, alleging that there were 122 separate discharges in just 2021 alone from the Wilburton Sea outfall, totaling at least over 8,000 tons of sewage and stormwater. Latimer says that the sewage discharges from the outfall has increased between 2017 and 2021. And there has been a failure by the government to comply with waste and water regulations, he said. There is still too much sewage being discharged into the sea. This is I said it back in 2020. This is a Brexit related thing. And this all started, really people started noticing it en masse in 2020 because there were even less environmental regulations for them to follow. You've also had, as we said there, some of this started back in 2017 because some of the water companies went, do we have to follow these European regulations anymore? Are the government going to force us to follow European regulations anymore? Which I think is even more worrying because if a lot of your safety equipment or anything like that, if your company is going to try and push it and say, well, we don't have to follow European regulations anymore, kind of worrying. Kind of very, very deeply worrying. And especially around this. Because this was actually one of the big benefits of European-wide regulation in and around sewage discharge. That we went from having very, very unclean, unsafe beaches to use recreationally to now the UK being predominantly be able to use pretty much every single beach in the UK. It was a big win for European regulations because we were part of that body that would go and really pursue these water companies and saying, why did this happen? What went on here? To full scale investigations. Now, as we've said, because of Brexit, we left those bodies, and the government, on purpose, has not fully funded some of these bodies that it really should be funding to be able to pursue these types of cases. That's why this ended up happening. And this is why this problem has only gotten worse. And this isn't, as I said at the beginning, the most wonderful time of the year for sewage to be dumped into the sea, because this is going to be a regular occurrence. Every year so far since 2020, we have covered the almost exact same story. There's all this sewage being pumped into the sea every single time, like clockwork. Just as we're seeing the huge queues at Dover again, because why? Everyone's going on holiday. It's causing a big problem. What is it? Oh, it's the customs checks that now people have to do and have to follow, which is again taking time, which causes massive queues. Massive problems at the queue at Dover again, not surprisingly. And now, of course, you've got this. And of course, coming up, I can already predict it, the farming issues where we get harvests once again rotting in the fields because farmers cannot hire enough people to be able to come and pick their crops. It's the holy trinity of Brexit stories. It really is. It really is. Trouble at the border, shit in the river, can't pick the crops. Trouble at the border again. That's generally the case. That is generally the case of what has happened here again, and this is just going to be a constant. We'll be covering this, I can guarantee you, this time, if not next year again. Why? Because this is when people go out and they want to use these, the rivers. They walk by these rivers and things like that. And of course, what happens? Well, they notice this, and it gets reported. It gets put on social media. But we warned about this every year. The Tories have done nothing about it. They refuse to do nothing about it. And to be honest, if I were Keir Starmer, I would be making a huge case out of this. Like, this is an absolute golden opportunity to go after Theresa Coffey. This is a goose that has laid a massive golden egg for Labour to really go after them and say, okay, these are our environmental policies. We are going to make sure this does not happen. And if this does happen to water companies, we're going to fully fund the investigation teams into these things so that they can find out exactly what has happened. Because the response from Northumberland Water says it all, saying, no, we have had no discharges from any of our assets that might have negatively impacted the water quality at either Rocker or the neighbouring Wolston North Bay since October of 2021. Both bathing waters were designated as excellent in the latest DEFRA classifications, and sampling to date in the current season has indicated this high quality is being maintained. So they're like, what are you talking about? The water's safe to swim in. Meanwhile, you've had an event. Over 57 swimmers have come down with diarrhea at this event and been sick because of swimming in this water. That is not a coincidence. But there you go. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.